Hi friends! Since it's the weekend before Christmas, I wanted to share a calm little recipe compilation you can have on in the background while you're pottering in the kitchen. It's a mix of the Christmas recipes I've made over the past couple of years, some simple treats, 2 full festive meals and a few easy ideas for party food. The music is gentle and Christmassy, something cozy to reach for while you bake or prep for the days ahead. I hope it keeps you company, almost like we're cooking alongside each other. And at the end, I've included a moment from a small concert my friend Natalia played in our home last year, along with a clip of me singing. I hope you enjoy it. I'm starting the dough for my cinnamon rolls, and in the background I'm milling some flour for a loaf I'll bake later, so the kitchen feels warm and cozy this morning. This is the sourdough cinnamon rolls recipe from Farmhouse on Boone, and I find that it works really well. I've swapped out the plain flour for whole grain, freshly milled flour, and it's sweetened with honey instead of sugar, and it just feels a little bit more healthy, and obviously the fermented grains make it even easier to digest. I had some yogurt whey to use up, so I decided to use that instead of water. I did add a little bit too much, so the dough is quite sticky, but you'll see later on in the video it turned out really well. The dough for the cinnamon rolls that you saw me prepare at the beginning of the video has been sitting on my counter all day, and then it went into the fridge at night. And this is the next day and I'm ready to make the rolls. That's a really good tip that I learned from Farmhouse on Boone, is that when you've got rich doughs like this that are quite sticky, it's a really good idea to let them rest in the fridge overnight so that they're really cold when you're trying to shape them. So I followed the recipe from Farmhouse on Boone for these cinnamon rolls, these sourdough cinnamon rolls. The only change that I made was that I used yogurt whey instead of water, just to add some extra flavour, and also I wanted to use it up. It had been in the fridge for a couple of days already. Unfortunately, I added too much, so the dough was rather more wet than it should have been, which is why it was a really good idea to put it in the fridge overnight, because as you can see, I'm able to roll it out with just a light dusting of flour on the work surface. So once you've got your dough rolled out, you can add the cinnamon filling and make sure that it's spread evenly over the dough. And then I'm going to use the same technique as I did with the slice and bake cookies, and I'm going to split the dough into 4 and then each fourth into thirds, and that will give me 12 even slices. Now I discovered this technique of cutting up the dough before rolling it, and I do think it works a lot better than rolling up the whole dough and then cutting the roll up, because that kind of flattens out the rolls, and you'll see here I get really nice round shapes when I do it this way. So I roll up each roll and then I place it into a buttered baking dish. These rolls are going to bake in the oven at 180 degrees Celsius for 20 to 25 minutes, or until they're nice and golden brown and cooked through. While the rolls are baking in the oven, I'm going to get on and make my frosting. So this frosting is traditionally made with cream cheese, but I thought I would try and make it with yogurt for a little bit of a healthier option and one that my boys can eat and enjoy too. So I'm just mixing up some yogurt that I've left to strain for a long time so it's nice and thick. I'm adding some vanilla essence and some maple syrup, and I'm just going to mix that up. This was quite tart, quite acidic, but it was really good. It went well with the cinnamon rolls that are already pretty sweet, so we didn't need any more sweetness in there, and it was just a nice creamy addition to these rolls. I discovered this recipe for slice and bake cookies last year, and it became a firm favourite in our family. So I'm going to start by creaming the butter and the sugar together. When the butter and the sugar are nice and fluffy, I'm going to add the dry ingredients. So I'm using freshly milled whole grain flour here instead of plain flour, vanilla essence for the flavouring, and also cocoa powder. Now I'm going to put this back in the stand mixer and let the dough come together. I don't want to overmix it, so I'm going to stop there. I'm going to form it into a log shape and wrap it in cling film and put it in the fridge. I almost forgot the most important part, a little bit of mint extract. You need to be careful when using mint extract because some can be quite strong, so I always start off with a little bit and add more if I need to. Slice and bake cookies because they're so easy to make. And when this is firmed up in the fridge, I'm just going to slice it into 12 and bake it on a baking sheet. Yeah, and into the fridge it goes. The cookie dough has been in the fridge for a few hours now, so it's time to cut it up. I'm going to cut it into 12 slices and bake it. I'm not very good at eyeballing quantities and measurements, so what I like to do is to cut my log up into 4, and then each fourth I will cut up into 3 slices, and this way I get 12 even cookies. I do find this slice and bake technique a lot easier and less time consuming than making cookies that you have to scoop out with cookie dough and make into balls and flatten. I just find this a lot easier and it really works for us. These will then bake in the oven at 180 degrees Celsius for 15 to 18 minutes. I wanted to whip up a little icing for the cookies. They're going to end up being quite sweet, but I think having sugar occasionally is okay, and I'm really trying to cut down on sugar for the rest of the treats, so I feel okay about giving this to the children. I'm going to just eyeball it, but basically I'm going to put some powdered sugar in a bowl and add just enough water to make it into a thick paste, and then I'll add a drop of mint extract and just taste it and keep adding the mint extract until it's the flavour that I want, because I don't want it to be too strong. So the idea is that I would just dip the cookies in here so it covers half of the cookie or just part of the cookie. This seems to be about the right texture. That's what we're looking for. So I can either drizzle this over the top or dip the cookies in there. I'm going to add just a tiny bit and taste it. That's already strong, so that's all we need. I decided to drizzle the icing because it's quite strong and I don't want the cookies to have an overpowering mint flavour. They could be more beautiful. I'm not very used to icing things, so icing doesn't go well with me usually. But let's see if they taste good. It's got a strong mint flavour and the chocolate's coming through too. I really like these. So I'm on to making the marshmallows now, but I can only get these little packets of gelatin and I'm not sure how much that comes to, so I'm going to measure it out now to see if I can make the full recipe or divide it in half. And I will link that recipe for you in the description box below. So I do have enough to make the full recipe. There's 3 tablespoons of gelatin there. So I'm going to let that bloom in my stand mixer while I get on and heat up the maple syrup and the water. In goes the gelatin and half a cup of water. I'm going to give that a quick stir and let it bloom. And blooming just means letting the gelatin soak up some of the water so it starts to get a little bit thick. Now I'm going to bring 1 cup of maple syrup to the boil with half a cup of water, and then I'll let it simmer for 5 minutes. Back to the marshmallow. The gelatin has bloomed, so I'm going to start whisking it, and by the time that's ready, the maple syrup will be ready to pour in. This is the delicate part. You need to be really careful because the syrup is very hot and you could burn yourself. When I've poured all of the syrup into the stand mixer, I'm going to turn up the speed to high and let it whisk for 8 minutes. The marshmallow has been whipping for about 8 to 10 minutes, I'm not really sure, I forgot to put the timer on. But it's looking like fluff, which is what we want. So I'm going to pour it into a dish that I've lined with parchment paper, and I'm going to let it set. That's too small, I need to get a bigger dish. Now that the marshmallows are made, I can get on and make this non-alcoholic mulled wine. I'm going to do this with grape juice. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat up this grape juice with clementine segments. I'm going to use 2 clementines, and then I'm going to add some spices, and I'm going to see how sweet it is. I know that grape juice is very, very sweet, so I'm not sure I need to add any sweetener. If I do, I will add a little bit of honey. So you want to make sure this is being heated very gently, you don't want it to boil. In go the clementine. I've peeled them because we don't like the bitter flavour of the skin, so this way we get the nice citrus flavour without the bitterness. Now for the spices, I'm adding 10 cloves, 3 sticks of cinnamon and 3 star anise, and this is for 1 litre. And I'm just going to let that heat nice and gently now until it's piping hot but not boiling. So first things first, I'm going to chop up this bar of chocolate, so it's 200 grams of dark chocolate. Now you do need to be careful with the quality chocolate you buy, and make sure it's at least 63% cocoa solids. That's the best kind of chocolate. And this chocolate is got sugar in it, so I am not going to be adding any sugar to the actual hot chocolate, just so that we can keep the sugar content down a little bit. When I'm making this hot chocolate, I like to make sure that the chocolate is cut up into nice small pieces, because this helps it to melt more easily. You don't want to be putting big chunks of chocolate in the milk. This recipe for hot chocolate is very simple. I'm going to start off by warming up a litre of water. So I'm going to put about 200 millilitres in one pan and the rest in the other. And then just warm it up gently. Again, you don't want this to come to the boil, you just want it to be piping hot. Now the small amount of milk is heated up. I'm going to take it off the heat and add the chocolate. Whisk that to mix it up. Nice and dark and very chocolatey. I'm going to add some vanilla extract and a teaspoon of cinnamon, but that's optional. Give that another stir. Now I'm going to add the rest of the hot milk to the chocolate mixture. Stir that up. And there you have it, delicious French style hot chocolate. Extremely simple to make, minimum ingredients and incredibly delicious. That's really good. Hi friends, today I wanted to show you my Christmas dinner menu. Now, Christmas can be a bit of a stressful time of year if you're dealing with food allergies, if you're on a tight budget, if you have different dietary requirements. You just might be thinking, what on earth can I make that everybody is still going to enjoy? So I've put together this menu that is really tasty, very easy to make. It's low budget, it comes in at under 40 euros for 8 people, and that's 3 courses, and there will probably be leftovers too. And it is also completely allergy friendly, so no dairy, no gluten. It's low carb, so it fits in with my boy's GAPS diet, and it just tastes really good, and all of the flavors go really well together. So I'm going to run you through this menu today and show you how to make it. It's very easy, you'll see. You can make it ahead of time. In fact, everything can be made the day before, except for maybe the butternut squash, but we'll get into that later. And it's just really easy to have something that's already ready. You just need to heat up on the day, so when you've got your friends and family over, you can just enjoy being with them on Christmas Day. First thing I'm going to be making today is creamy white bean soup with roasted garlic and bacon. And as with every single recipe in this video, you can get them over on the blog, and I will link everything in the description box below. I've even done a roundup post which describes each dish. It gives you a full shopping list, complete breakdown of cost and prices, so that's based for me here near Paris in France, and it also has a cooking schedule if you're going to be making it the day of. So you can download all of that on my blog, candleinthekitchen.com. Just for sake of clarity, I'm going to be showing you each recipe separately on this video, even though I was actually cooking them all at the same time. So we're starting with this creamy white bean soup with roasted garlic and bacon. And for that I roasted the garlic. I cut 2 heads of garlic in half, drizzled them with olive oil, sprinkled a bit of salt on there, and then I cooked them in aluminium foil in the oven at 180, 200 degrees Celsius for about an hour, and they do need to be really nice and soft. That's how you know that they're done. And while they were cooking, I started to prepare the soup. So I fried some onion, and then I added the white beans, some stock, that's homemade broth that I'd made, some salt, a sprig of rosemary, and I put that all in the Instant Pot, and that's going to cook for 30 minutes. Again, while that's cooking, I'm now making the bacon. So I've just frying this bacon. I didn't add any extra fat. There's usually plenty of fat on the bacon. These are what we call lardons here in France, so bacon bits, but you can cook normal bacon rashers and cut them up afterwards if you prefer. So the garlic is done now. It's nice and soft. And I'm going to spoon this white bean and stock mixture into the blender. So I'm taking out the rosemary because we don't want any of that hard herb in there. And I waited for the soup to cool down a little bit because you don't want to put boiling hot liquid into this blender. So I ladled it all into the blender, and then I'm going to just squeeze the cloves of garlic into the soup before I blend it up together. Don't make my mistake, make sure that your blender is properly closed before you turn it on, because mine spurted everywhere, as you can see. Anyway, I cleared it up afterwards, it was fine. So you blend it until it's perfectly smooth, and that's how you get a delicious creamy soup without adding any dairy at all. And you serve that with the bacon bits sprinkled on top. Now we're on to the Christmas chicken tagine with prunes and apricots. So to start this dish, you need to fry the chicken legs, and these were pretty big, so I could only fit in 2 or maybe 3 into my big pan at once. You need to make sure that you fry them in small batches so that you can get a nice crisp skin on them. So when all of the chicken is done, I'm going to add the onions to the pot. Now you do need to remove some of the oil because the chicken is very fatty and it gives out a lot of grease. So before, I didn't do it straight away, but I did remove the oil afterwards. But before you add the onions, remove some of the oil if you think there's too much in there. Fry the onions until they're soft but not brown. Then you add the spices. So I've got ras el hanout spice, which is a spice that they use for tagines in Morocco, and I'm adding some cinnamon to that too. And I'm just going to let that fry with the onions for 1 minute. This is also the point where you need to add the garlic. To that onion and spice mix, I'm going to add the tomatoes, and then I'm going to let these tomatoes cook down until it's a very thick, syrupy consistency. Now that took 10 minutes to get to this consistency, and as you can see we have a really nice rich base for our sauce. And now I'm adding some more bone broth. Now I'm going to add the dried fruit. So there are 12 prunes and 12 apricots going in here, and I'm just going to bring that all to the boil before I put it in an oven-proof dish that's large enough to hold all of the chicken, and then I'm going to place the chicken on the top. Now, since we're trying to keep things low carb, because my 2 younger boys are on the GAPS diet at the moment, I decided to accompany this dish with some butternut squash that I'm going to cut into cubes, drizzle with olive oil, sprinkle with salt, and roast in the oven for about 30 minutes. What's really good about doing it this way is you can roast the butternut squash at the same time as the chicken is cooking. It cooks at the same temperature. The taste goes really well, the texture goes really well. It was just a really good pairing. Now, you can use couscous as an accompaniment instead. It's cheaper, but it does contain gluten, so it's not suitable for everyone. Now I'm on to making the raspberry sorbet. So I've defrosted some frozen raspberries, I'm adding some honey, and then I'm going to squeeze in the juice of 1 orange and 1 lemon, and I'm going to add a bit of cinnamon for a Christmassy twist. that all gets blended up together, and then I'm going to sieve it and press it through a sieve with a silicone spatula so that I don't have any of the seeds or bits or anything that's not a nice texture in the sorbet. This takes a little bit of time. It's easy to do, but it does take a little bit of time, which is why it's a really good idea to get this sorbet made the day before. So even if you're eating in the evening and you think you're going to have time for the sorbet to set before you eat, if you make it in the morning, it just takes a bit of time. So making it the day before takes away that stress. You don't want to be doing this on Christmas morning. I like to serve this sorbet in star shapes with my star silicone mould, and in fact my boys now call it star sorbet, which is really cute. It just looks so attractive. It's a perfect dessert for Christmas, and I hope you'll give it a go. It's time to get going with the salad. So the first thing I'm going to do is roast some pecan nuts, and I am only making 5 salads today, and I counted probably 5 pecan nuts per plate would be a good number. So I would only roast the amount that you're actually going to use. For me, that is 5 times 5 is 25. I'm just going to roast these gently until they start to smell and we get that beautiful nutty fragrance coming. Now I'm going to get on with the other components of my salad, and one of those components is clementine. So I'm counting about half a clementine per person. I'm doing 3 for tonight's dinner. And you want to peel them and try and get as much of the white pith off as you can, and then separate them into little segments. If there are any pips in there, you probably want to take the pips out as well. And now it's really smelling like Christmas, because clementines is one of those things that for me just immediately reminds me of Christmas. Next I'm going to prepare some prosciutto. So I get this from Costco, and it's excellent because it's only meat and salt, so no additives at all, and so that's perfect for us. I'm just going to use 1 slice per person, and this really keeps the cost down. It just adds a little bit of savoury saltiness to the salad, and you only need a little bit of it. And you just want to break this up into small pieces that you can then place around your salad. Dressing, I'm going to use a balsamic vinegar base. So I'm keeping it pretty simple. I'm going to use mustard, avocado oil, balsamic vinegar, and then a little bit of honey and a little bit of pumpkin spice. I'm just trying this out, but I think it might be a really good addition to this salad. So to start with, we need 180 millilitres of oil. And you can use whichever oil you prefer. I like to use a neutral flavoured oil, so not so much olive oil for salad dressings. I'm using avocado oil today, but you could also use whatever good quality neutral flavoured oil you prefer. Now I'm adding 1 tablespoon of mustard, 3 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar, 2 tablespoons of honey, I'm going to do 1 teaspoon of salt and 1 teaspoon of pumpkin spice, or you can use mixed spice, whichever spice blend you like. Now the advantage of making it in a mason jar or a jam jar is that you don't need to do any stirring, you can just shake it up. have it, some delicious dressing. And this actually is even better when it's been refrigerated for a couple of hours. It emulsifies better, so this is a really good thing to make in advance. To plate up this salad, you need a handful of greens, so I like this lamb's tongue lettuce, then half a clementine per person, one slice of ham that you've torn into bite-sized pieces, and about a tablespoon of dried cranberries. Then I'm going to add 5 pecans, and drizzle about a tablespoon of the dressing over each plate. This salad is the perfect way to start a Christmas dinner. It's light, it's colourful, and it's full of flavour. For the main course, I'm making an absolute no-fuss dish. It's turkey leg with onions and apples, and you can either serve it like that because there'll be a nice gravy in the bottom of the pan from the onions and the apples, or you can add some creme fraiche if you can eat dairy. This is such a delicious meal. I really recommend you try it, even if it's just a normal weekend. It's amazing and well worth a go. So I'm going to cut up 2 large onions, and we want them sliced. I'll put those in the bottom of a baking dish. Now I'm going to cut 6 small apples into quarters, and I'm going to leave the skin on because these are organic and it helps them to keep their shape. In fact, I'm going to do them in 8ths because I think that's too large. I'm going to place the turkey leg on top of the onions and arrange the apples around it. I'm going to add a sprig of dried sage in there, drizzle with olive oil. You could also use butter if you like. And sprinkle with salt. You need about 1.5 teaspoons of salt. This will bake for about 1.5 hours at 200 degrees Celsius. To go with my turkey leg, I'm going to be roasting some butternut squash with a little bit of honey and salt and pepper. It's a very simple recipe, but it turns out really well, and it'll just bring this meal over the top. Now let me just show you my hack for cutting up butternut. You don't want to be hacking into it. All you need to do is place your sharp knife on the skin, press down quite hard, and rock it to and fro, and the knife will go straight through it. Let me show you that again a bit closer up. Easy peasy. Now I'm going to get this peeled and cut into small cubes. Now that I've cut up the butternut squash into cubes, I'm going to drizzle a couple of tablespoons of olive oil over the top. Sprinkle a teaspoon of salt, some black pepper. I don't have very much, but you put as much as you like on there, and 1 tablespoon of honey, and try and get it all over. I'm going to put this butternut squash in the oven with the turkey for the last half an hour, and I shall stir it 15 minutes in just to make sure that the honey and the salt are well distributed. So this is going to cook in total for 30 minutes at 200 degrees Celsius. Time for the butternut to go in the oven. This turkey leg tastes great just as it is, served with the butternut squash. The apples and the onions make a great accompaniment. However, if you want to make it a little bit more luxurious and you can eat dairy, I suggest removing the apples and the onions from the roasting dish, popping them into a pan and adding a good lot of creme fraiche. You heat this up to make a delicious creamy sauce that is sweet and savoury at the same time, and it is absolutely delicious. Now, poached pears is usually made with a sugar syrup, but because there's already going to be plenty of sugar in the sabayon, I decided to use honey instead, and I think that's just going to add loads of extra flavour. I'm doing half a cup of honey. To 4 cups of water. To bring this to a simmer. While that's heating up, I'm going to add some spice. 4 cloves, 1 stick of cinnamon, 3 star anise. While that's heating up, I'm going to get on and prepare these pears. Now they're just conference pears, and I'm going to quarter them and remove the skin, of course. So the syrup has come to a simmer, and I'm going to add my pears. So I've quartered 4 pears, which should be enough for 8 people. I'm going to bring this back up to the boil, or back up to a simmer rather, and then let it simmer for about 15 minutes, and I'll test them after 15 minutes. And the pears look like this while they're simmering. It's barely bubbling. It really needs to be really gentle so as not to make the pears break apart. I think these pears are done now, so I'm going to take them off the heat and leave them to cool down in the syrup. It smells amazing. I think that if you can make this the night before and leave it in the fridge, in the syrup, those pears will have an even more concentrated flavour. I'll have to do that next time. Now this is a family recipe and I can't take any credit for it. It's my mother-in-law's recipe, but I am going to ask her if she minds if I put it on the blog for you, because this is definitely one you're going to want to try, if you can eat dairy, that is. So I'm going to start off by separating the egg whites and the egg yolks. So the egg whites are going to go in my stand mixer because I need to whip those until they're firm, and the egg yolks are going to go into another bowl to be beaten with the sugar and the mascarpone. I'm not doing a huge amount today. I'm just doing 250 grams of mascarpone, so I'm only using 2 eggs. Now I'm going to add 80 grams of sugar to the egg yolks. You could add more, and the recipe is usually more sugar than this, but I'm trying to keep sugar to a minimum. So while I mix up the egg yolks and the sugar, I'm going to whip these egg whites until they form stiff peaks. need to whisk together the egg yolks and the sugar until the egg yolks become pale, and then you add the mascarpone and give that a good mix together so that there are no lumps in there. Now the egg whites have become very stiff, and that's perfect for this recipe. Now I'm going to fold this in really gently so as not to break up the egg whites. And this is the bit that I'm not very patient with, and I usually do it too quickly and then it kind of flops, but I'm going to try and go slow today. And there you have it, one of our favourite desserts, and it only takes minutes to make. The pears and the sabayon pair beautifully together, and it's really one of my favourite desserts for Christmas because it feels a little bit special even though it's actually really simple. So I just like to serve a little bit of sabayon along with these poached pears, and it is always a hit. Don't forget you can get all of these recipes over on the blog. Just check out the link in the description box below. This is a no-fuss Christmas dinner. It is absolutely delicious, but it takes no time at all to pull together. So I've already got some eggs boiling to make some deviled eggs. My children have actually been asking me for these, so I thought that I would make them. They would make a really good treat and a great party food. I'm also going to be making some mini chocolate fondants, which is one of our favourite cakes, and I'm going to be baking them up in star-shaped moulds so that they have more of a festive feel. So these eggs should be cooked through. I'm going to drain them off and let them sit in some cold water for a little while. Now for the deviled eggs, I've never actually made this before because it's always seemed like a bit of a faff to me. But it is Christmas and this is special party food, so I'm going to make an effort. So the first thing you need to do, once the eggs have cooled, you need to peel them. And this is going to take a little while, so I'm going to do that off camera. So now I'm going to remove the egg yolks. And this is some homemade mayonnaise that I made a couple of days ago. So I'm just going to add a little bit and mash that up. Now, I'm not using a recipe, I am eyeballing this. I've never made it before, so I hope I'm doing it right. Definitely need more mayonnaise. I'm going to add a spoonful of the egg yolk and mayonnaise mixture to each egg. Now for a touch of festive colour and extra flavour, I'm going to sprinkle these eggs with a little bit of smoked paprika. Now I'm on to the mini chocolate fondants, and for this I'm going to start off by melting together 200 grams of very good quality chocolate with 250 grams of butter, and you want to melt this really slowly. Since getting my mill, I've started making all of my baked goods with freshly milled flour, and this is one recipe that works really well with this whole grain flour. It makes it so delicious. The chocolate and the butter have cooled down enough for me to add the rest of the ingredients. I thought that I'd turned the heat off the chocolate and the butter, but I obviously forgot, and it's overheated. So when this happens, sometimes the cake will look a bit greasy, or it might have a bit of a peculiar flavour to it. I'm hoping it'll be fine, but I'm pretty sure that my family will eat it anyway. So make sure that the butter is just melted and then turn the heat off so that it doesn't heat up too much. I'm going to start by adding 4 eggs. And give that a good stir. You want to make sure that the butter and the chocolate mixture is completely cooled before you add the eggs, otherwise they will scramble in there, which won't be good. Now I'm going to add some flour that I freshly milled just earlier on. There's 110 grams here. And you need to stir that quite vigorously so that you don't have any lumps in the mixture. Now I'm going to add about 160 grams of sugar. And a little touch of salt. And I'll link the recipe for this chocolate cake in the description box below. The recipe is actually a gluten and dairy-free chocolate cake, but you can use the exact measurements and replace with whichever flour you like. So I'm using whole grain here, or you can use gluten-free like it says in the recipe, and you can use real butter instead of the dairy-free version that's on the blog. Just give that a taste. Tastes pretty good. So I've got whole prunes here, and I need to remove the pits before I can get on with this recipe, so I'm just going to do that now really quickly. If you buy unpitted prunes, this will obviously go a lot quicker. Now I'm going to roll each prune in half a slice of prosciutto. And secure it with a toothpick. So the reason that I like to use prosciutto for this is because it has minimal additives. It's literally just meat and salt. And it goes at 210 degrees Celsius for about 15 minutes. sourdough crackers. I've got some sourdough starter here. It's a really simple recipe that I found on Little Spoon Farm, which I'll link in the description box below. I'm going to start by measuring how much sourdough discard I've got here so that I can adjust the recipe. So I've got 200 grams. In fact, I've got over 200 grams, so I can make a full recipe. I'm going to measure about 30 grams of butter and just melt it quickly in the microwave. Then to that I'm going to add the sourdough starter and a little bit of salt. In goes the 200 grams of starter. A quarter teaspoon of salt. 2 teaspoons of herbe de Provence. I'm going to mix that up really well. Now I'm going to spread that thinly onto a lined baking sheet. Now the thinner you spread it, the quicker it will cook, according to the recipe. Makes sense? So I'm going to see how thinly I can spread it on this sheet. To make sure that it's evenly spread all over, the same thickness all over, or as much as possible. This goes in the oven at 160 degrees for 10 minutes and then I'm going to score it. Now I'm going to score these crackers so that they're easier to break up when they come out of the oven later. I forgot to sprinkle them with salt, so I'm going to do that now too. And there you go, back in the oven for about 20 minutes until they're nicely browned all over. These crackers were delicious, tangy, salty, herby. They went really well with the feta dip that I'm about to make. And I will definitely be making them again because they were so easy. This next recipe is another new one for me. It's whipped feta. It's very easy to make, especially if you've got a food processor. And I thought it'd be really good with some veggie sticks. So all you need to do is pop in a block of feta. I've got 180 grams here. Then I'm using 2/3 of a cup of Greek yogurt. This is homemade. And the zest of 1 lemon. Now I'm using a microplane for this. It's one of my favourite kitchen tools. It's really good for grating any citrus fruit and also parmesan. We use it several times a week and I'll link one below for you if you're interested. Once the feta and the Greek yogurt have been whipped together in the food processor, you need to add a couple of tablespoons of olive oil just to help it emulsify and become a bit richer. To serve this dip, the recipe calls for fresh herbs and pine nuts, but I didn't have any fresh herbs or pine nuts, so I'm just using some thyme that I had and drizzling over some olive oil. And this was really good. It was quite a strong flavour, but it went very well with the vegetable sticks and we really enjoyed it. I've got a real treat for you today. A few weeks ago, my friend Natasha offered to come and do a concert at our house. And of course we said yes because she plays so beautifully. She's a concert pianist and she offered to play some Beethoven, some Chopin, some Grieg. And we just love music. So we said yes and we decided to make it into a bit of a party. So in today's video, you'll see me make lots of food that I'm going to be serving up to our guests. And if you skip on to the end of the video, you'll hear Natasha play and also you'll hear me sing because I don't know if you knew this already, but I am a singer and a choir director. That's my day job. I don't get too much of a chance to sing by myself anymore, but I thought this would be a great occasion to pull out some music that I love and to sing for my family and friends. So you can see that at the end of the video too. But in the first part of this video, I'm going to be showing you the food that I made to serve up in the evening for our family and friends. So there's some sourdough recipes, there's some British mince pies, there's some hummus, and here you can see me mixing up some sourdough crackers. But before I go into explaining how I made those sourdough crackers, I wanted to tell you what I was doing first in this video when I was mixing up that bread. So I've got a couple of different bread recipes going on here. I've got a sourdough focaccia that's going to be topped with caramelised onion and brie, and I've got an apple and pecan pull-apart bread. So I needed to get those breads fermenting and ready to bake so that I can stuff them the following day, because this is actually the day before the party. I decided to get as much done as I could the day before. So the bread is fermenting. I've mixed it up using my normal bread recipes which you can find over on the blog. And now I'm onto this sourdough discard cracker recipe which I got from Farmhouse on Boone. So the recipe basically consists of sourdough discard, butter and some seasoning in the form of herbs and salt. So this was a really good recipe, very easy. It had a lovely taste. It almost tasted cheesy even though I didn't put any cheese in there. The tang of the sourdough is really good in these crackers and it went really well with the hummus that I made. However, the one thing that I will say is that Farmhouse on Boone recommends rolling it out in between two pieces of parchment paper, and that just did not work for me. I don't know if it's because my flour is not as strong as American flour, but the crackers stuck to the parchment paper. It was really awkward to roll out. So I gave up and just rolled it out on a very well-floured work surface. So the secret to these discard crackers are getting them very, very thin so that they bake up quickly. They bake on 180 degrees Celsius for 15 minutes and then you just break them up by hand, or you could cut them if you wanted them to look a bit neater, but I like this kind of rustic look to them. You break them up and then they're just the perfect size to eat with hummus or with cheese. Really delicious and well worth giving them a go. So now I'm on to making the mince pies, and I mixed up this pastry earlier on and it's been sitting in the fridge for about 20 minutes. I'll put the recipe for this in the description box below, but basically I use a normal short crust pastry recipe and I just replace some of the flour and all of the water with discard, and it makes a really easy to roll out pastry, and it's very tasty too. If you wanted to get some of the health benefits from the fermentation, you could make it the day before and leave it in the fridge overnight. Just make sure you leave enough time for it to sit out and soften up a bit before you try and roll it out. So I rolled it out thinly, cut out some little rounds and put them in these mini muffin holders. And I'm putting mincemeat in there. Now, British mincemeat is not the same as normal mincemeat. It's something we eat at Christmas. It's basically dried fruit, raisins and currants and sultanas mixed with some alcohol and spices. I'll put a recipe for that in the description box below. I added lots of apple to this because I wanted it to be a bit lighter, a bit more fruity rather than the heavy raisin flavour. It turned out really well, and I topped it with some crumble topping just for a special sweet touch to it. Now throughout the day I'm going to be doing stretcher folds and coil folds on my bread. This is the focaccia dough, which is quite sticky. That's normal because focaccia dough needs to be a lot stickier than normal bread dough. It doesn't need to hold its shape because it's going to be sitting in a pan and cooking in a pan rather than in a boule shape. So this is what it's supposed to look like, and it turned out really well. Here I'm making some sugar-free cookies, so I do this by using egg whites, some honey, some almonds, some cinnamon and a little bit of salt. These are really delicious cookies. You wouldn't even notice that they are sugar-free. They are so good. They taste a little bit like Lebanese cookies, like baklava, the inside of a baklava. Very, very tasty and a real treat this Christmas if you're gluten-free or trying to cut down on sugar. These are also really easy to make. You just put all of the ingredients together in a bowl and mix them up. It's a batter that's very easy to mix too. It's very loose and sticky. I use a cookie scoop then to get them into balls onto a baking sheet, and I'll press a whole almond into the top so they look pretty, they taste delicious, and it's ready in no time at all. And if you want to try out this recipe, I will put the link in the description box below. It's a new recipe on the blog. So when I'm making food for a crowd, I'm trying to make sure that there is enough there for my children to eat that have allergies. So those sugar-free almond cookies were definitely something that they can eat. There's no gluten in there, no sugar, no dairy. And this is another recipe, a savoury one, which is butternut squash hummus. So I started by making butternut squash puree. I'm adding chickpeas, you can also do it with white beans, tahini, some lemon juice, some salt and some cumin. So I blend that up until it's smooth, and then I will add some cold water a little bit at a time until it's smooth and silky. Not too runny, but I don't like it to be too thick either. So the focaccia dough fermented all day yesterday, and then it fermented in the fridge overnight, and now I'm ready to bake it and to top it. So I have put oil in the pan underneath it last night before I put it in the fridge, and now I'm drizzling olive oil on the top. I'm dimpling it with my fingers. This is the really fun part. I love all the bubbles that appear when I do this. And then I'm going to bake it in the oven. This will bake in the oven for about 20 minutes at 220 degrees Celsius. While it's baking, I'm going to get on and fry the onions. They need to be soft and caramelized, but not too brown, because they're going to go back in the oven and bake with the focaccia. And while the focaccia is baking and the onions are caramelizing, I'm getting ready to make this apple and pecan pull apart bread. So I'm cutting up some apples quite finely. You can see the bread that I baked earlier on in the day over there just next to me. I'm going to slice the brie. I'm going to make a crumble topping with brown sugar, pecan and cinnamon, and then I will show you in just a minute how I put it all together. This is right before the concert. I'm doing this at the last minute, so it's all hands on deck. My husband's helping me with the apples while I'm cutting up the cheese, and you can see the onions there frying gently. So the focaccia has been baking for 20 minutes. I'm taking it out of the oven until the onions are done, and then I'm going to be topping it and putting it back in the oven. I'm doing 100 things at once, so I'm baking the focaccia and I'm putting together the pull apart bread, and you can see me here mixing up the crumble topping. I got the idea from Half Baked Harvest. She has a great recipe over there, and I decided to mix it up a bit and use apples in there too. Now to put together this pull apart bread. In French, we like to call this hedgehog bread, and I think you can see why. I'm slicing some butter here to put in the cuts that I've just made, and you do need quite a lot of butter. Don't be afraid to put all of that butter in there. Next, I'm adding the apple, and then I will be adding the brie. And I'll be adding the crumble topping, which I press down into the cracks and onto the bread. That's going to bake in the oven at 180 degrees Celsius for about 20 minutes, or until the cheese has melted. And I like to bake it in my cast iron skillet that you can just see there next to me, because that's a beautiful way to present it too. I can just put the whole thing on the table as it is. finishing off the focaccia, I'm sprinkling those onions on the top, putting the brie on there too. You can also add some sprigs of rosemary, and that's going to bake in the oven again for 10 more minutes. And I think I put it in there with the pull apart bread, so that was at 180 degrees for the last 10 minutes. This was such a delicious spread. We really enjoyed it, but the thing that we enjoyed most of all was the wonderful music that Natasha played for us. So I'm going to leave you with that music now. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like and comment and subscribe. I make videos every week on homemade food from scratch, allergy-friendly meal ideas, and lots of sourdough. Have a wonderful Christmas, everyone, and I'll see you in the new year. Bye.
tree of